So next year, we reported that the new iPhone 17 Pro and 17 Pro Max are going to get a makeover, a do-over, so to speak. Getting new colors, bold colors, sort of bringing the same boldness from the iPhone 16 and 16 Plus to the iPhone 17 Pro and 17 Pro Max. So you're going to get new colors, right? Which is cool. You're going to get a new iPhone model. The iPhone 17 Air, a razor-thin device. Everybody's heads are going to explode when Apple announces that. And we got some information on some specs. So today we got word that Apple... Now, it's very interesting because, as you know, Apple AI, it's been all over the place. Now, it hasn't officially been released, although I believe it's going to make an appearance, let's see here, right around the corner. iOS 18.1 at the end of this month should hit devices, and iPhone users that have a new 16 series or the 15 Pro or Pro Max should see a few. Apple's going to do a slow rollout of their Apple AI, but nonetheless, if you have a model that qualifies for Apple AI, you will see some features rolled out in iOS 18.1 here in the next few weeks. But we got word that, and speaking of Apple AI, timeout. Speaking of Apple AI, it requires a lot of power, a lot of performance, a lot of memory. And that's why I said if your device qualifies. Well, Samsung, who's running AI on their devices, have a lot of RAM, right? And they're increasing it, I believe, next year. I think some of their models are going to have 16 gigs of RAM. The Pixel 9 Pro series, Pro and Pro XL, have 16 gigabytes of RAM. Now, for Apple to qualify for Apple AI to have a device, you have to have a M series chip, right, on a MacBook or MacBook Air or iPad. That'll qualify you. But you also have to have at least 8 gigabytes of RAM, right? So that would mean the 15 Pro Max and the 15 Pro would qualify. And then all the iPhones this year were released with 8 gigabytes of RAM. But those wondering, is that enough RAM to run AI? Because Samsung got 12 and 16 gigs. Google's running 16 gigs on their new devices of RAM. Well, Apple, it looks like, always late to the party on some of these things. But we got word today that Apple is going to boost the RAM. Thank God. Apple's going to boost the RAM on the iPhone 17 Pro Max. Is rumored to be the only iPhone with 12 gigs of RAM. So a little bit of good news, bad news, right? Good news, Apple's going to really jack the RAM up. Now, I say really, if they really want to jack it up, go to 16, like Google or like Samsung's going to do. 12 is more than enough to fully use some of these features. And I think Apple's going to introduce more AI features as time goes on. So as we get closer to the 17 series launch, you're going to see them roll out more and more features. And with that rollout of more and more AI features, you're going to need more memory, right? It needs somewhere to store that random access memory. And if you run out of memory, your AI features aren't going to work, right? I mean, that's what it boils down to. Now, the interesting thing, the bad news, so to speak, it's only going to be available, not the AI, but the 12 gigs of RAM is only going to be available on the 17 Pro Max, meaning the 17 Pro is not getting 12 gigs of RAM. What about the 17 Air? Apple is going to discontinue the Plus model, so there will be no 17 Plus. They're going to insert the 17 Air, that razor-thin device. Is that getting 12 gigs of RAM, right? Or is it going to be 8? I would hate to say, going back to Samsung, why are you charging? And that 17 Air is going to be very, very expensive. I can promise you. It's going to be cutting-edge technology. It'll be the thinnest device ever released, mobile phone device ever released. Are they going to put 12 gigs in there? It's going to be probably $1,500, $1,600, $1,700. So why are you going to charge all this money, $1,700 for a phone, and you're not even putting in the best tech you got in it, right? Or you're not speccing it out, right? So, it just little things like that bug me. But it's up to us, the consumer, to buy it or not. So, but the news we have right now, just the Pro Max is getting 12 gigs of RAM. Now, that's not to say in the future, Apple could come out, or a leak could come out and say, oh no, yeah, the 17 Air is getting it too. So this leaker could have had news, or his source could have just proved to him that, showing the model number. Hey, I got the 17 Pro Max model number, and shows it's getting 12 gigs of RAM. We got a memory chip here. Our big supplier, they just put in a huge order for 12 gig chips. It could be something like that. Not saying that Apple does not have plans for the 17 Air, but his source, whoever put the story out, his source could have only knowledge of the 17 Pro Max, right? I'm assuming, I might, not yet, but I might be willing to bet that Apple does you will finally see 12 gigs of RAM in the 17 Air model, and maybe the 17 Pro just 8 gigs of RAM, or maybe the 17 just 8 gigs of RAM, or we're still really, really early. So technically you could see 12 gigs in the Pro Max, 12 gigs of RAM in the Air, 12 gigs of RAM in the Pro. But this story says the Pro Max is the only device getting 12 gigs of RAM. So again, Apple could change their mind, but just keep this piece of information with you. So now that the iPhone 16 launch is behind us, we are all talking about the 17 series, because the 16 series, basically the same phone, just a few internal components upgraded, but basically the same phone as the 15 series. It all looks the same, with a couple of minor improvements. Now, this tip, the 12 gigs of RAM for the 17 Pro Max, comes from a reliable tipster. So I've seen this tipster's name before in a couple of reliable pieces of news, right? It's said to be more likely, quote unquote, that the 17 Pro Max gets 12 gigs of RAM, while the 17 Pro sticks to just 8, which is what is inside of all iPhone 16 models this year. According to this leak, Samsung is hitting issues with its memory module production line, and that means there's not going to be enough components to fit inside the millions of iPhone 17 Pros that Apple wants to order, as well as the 17 Pro Max phones. That's a big issue. When your supplier can't supply you with all of your parts that you need to build a phone, and so you're saying, well, Apple's asking Samsung, because Samsung produces these memory chips for Apple, right? Again, newsflash, yes, it's an Apple product, and yes, they make their own CPU, or should I say design their own CPU. TSMC actually makes it, but a lot of these parts, like the speaker, the vibration motor, the memory in there, Apple does not make, Apple does not produce, Apple does not design. It's produced by other companies. So what if Samsung has been tripping over their own feet producing chips this last year or two, and Apple's saying, so you're telling me you don't have enough chips to supply us with 12 gigs for the whole lineup, or for at least the Pros in the Air? Samsung's like, nope. Great. Well, I guess we'll just put all the 12 gigs in the Pro Max, and everything else gets 8. That's not good. That's not good at all. So they're saying this is not a completely new rumor. Well-respected analyst Ming-Chi Kuo has previously said that 12 gigs of RAM would be an iPhone 17 Pro Max exclusive, and did not go into further details. Well, that would be interesting, wouldn't it? How would you feel if you got a 17 Pro or a iPhone 17 Air and it only had 12 gigs of RAM? I would not be happy, but it is what it is. Look, and if you, the consumer, are not satisfied with what a company is putting out there, not just Apple, but any company, don't buy the product. That's your only way to basically be heard, right? You can complain all you want on social media, but where it hits these, they're probably just going to laugh at you. Where it hurts, for these companies, is in the pocket. So if you're not supporting a decision a company is making, then simply don't buy the product. That's about all we can do as a consumer. And then over time, they will probably learn their lesson, but who knows? Apple, I believe, is the most valuable company in the world. But look, if they see their numbers going way down, then for a certain model, then they may make changes, right? You never know. But keep it locked in. eSIM Studios. I'm going to keep a very, very close eye on this information, and we'll bring you the very latest. Thank you for joining us today. I really appreciate it. I got to run, have other obligations, but don't forget, this Friday, we're going to have a giveaway. I'll probably think of something to give away, something cool to give away this evening. I'll go ahead and schedule the giveaway live stream on Friday, way in advance, probably tomorrow at the latest, Wednesday. But I'll put it out there. We'll schedule it so you know when to tune in so you can win something cool. I do appreciate the time, as always. Please be safe this afternoon. Brian, Daniel, appreciate you joining us today. Have a great evening, and I will see you tomorrow, as always. Peace.